Ji ma'am, good afternoon. Sanfro.
Alaikum salam. So, good afternoon. So we can start.
Ji ma'am, we have around 62 students have joined. So you can start if you like.
All right. The PPT is visible.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right. I think so. Can you see the PPT now?
No. No.
Okay, just a second. All right. So now it's visible, huh?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
It's visible, Zareen?
Ji ma'am, it is visible.
Okay, all right. Now, see, the previous class that we had very summarily, very briefly, we had discussed what organizational behavior is, and one session was taken by Zareen ma'am also, wherein she had basically introduced the concept of OP. So today what I'll be doing is I'll kind of summarize again all of those things and then come to what we basically essentially mean by organizational behavior as a discipline. So if you remember, those of you who were present, if you remember last class we discussed that organizational behavior is basically a study of the behavior of individuals, how people behave in an organization. And it's important because how we behave affects our performance. And our performance basically is the performance of the organization. So how people work, how they perform, how they interact, teams, how they communicate, all that is part of organizational behavior. And all of these, your overall productivity and your performance, and it impacts the overall performance of the organization. So behavior is extremely important. They are critical because they affect the overall working of the organization. We had also discussed in the previous class that essentially all managers are people managers. We normally associate people management with HR people, and we say human resource managers are the people who who are concerned with people related issues. But basically all managers are people managers. Whether you are a marketing manager or a finance manager or an IT manager, you are essentially a people manager, because managers, they work with people, they work with employees, they have a team. And they motivate this team, they lead this team, they guide the team, they communicate with the team. So basically, all people who are managers, they are working with people and they are managing people. So we say that organizational behavior is a discipline that is of concern to all managers. So whether they are marketing managers or finance managers or operation managers, they are all working with people. And so an understanding of organizational behavior is extremely crucial for all managers. We all need to have those people-related skills, the soft skills as we call them, that understanding of what behaviors are like and what are the problematic behaviors in the organization. How can we improve people's behaviors? How can we have behaviors that are positive for the organization, which can steer the organization towards greater and greater success? So essentially, all managers that way are people managers, and that is why OB is an important discipline that has to be appreciated by all managers. An important framework that we often discuss in strategic management and many other disciplines, concepts of management, which is called as WIRO framework. This WIRO framework says that resources are valuable, inimitable, rare, and original. Any resource that you have, will, if it is valuable, if it is inimitable, it cannot be imitated, if it is rare and if it is original, then that is an important resource for you. And you say that people have skills, they have talent, they have knowledge, they have capabilities. These capabilities are inimitable. You cannot imitate a person's talent. You cannot imitate a person's capabilities. So X has different set of capabilities, Y may have different set of capabilities, and so on. So it's all inimitable. So the talent that you have, I may not be having that talent. So we all have different skills. We all have different capabilities. So it's all inimitable. It's original, it's your skill, it's your knowledge. So it's original. So people have, skills which are valuable, which are inimitable, which are rare, and which are original. So these skills and knowledge, these capabilities that people have, all of these things become critical resources for the most important for the organization. And that is why we say that people are the most important assets. If you are an organization, your competitors can have the same products, they can have the same plant, they can have the same machinery, they can have the same equipment, but they can never have the same people. They can never have the same skills. So basically, your talent is your competitive advantage. And that is why people are the most important assets. And because people are the most important assets, so is the most critical aspect of any management discipline. And that is why organizational behavior becomes a very critical discipline for managers to understand, because it's all about managing people. It's all about managing people's behavior. It's all about ensuring that people's skills are put to the best use. So that is what organizational behavior is. So it's a field of study that investigates individual behavior, group behavior, and overall structural behavior of an organization. And to understand these behavioral dimensions and to use this knowledge to improve efficiency and effectiveness of an organization. So that is what organizational behavior is. So in the previous class that we had, I had discussed that organizational behavior is behavior of individuals as individuals, behavior of people in groups, and then behavior of people in the overall setup of the organization as part of a structure. So how we behave as individuals, how we behave as overall organizational members, all these things are part of the study of, which includes these three components. Now, this is an important thing to understand in organizational behavior, that preconceived notions are not facts, and behavior would be about facts. But I think this is important is that often we interpret people's behaviors based on our preconceived notions. Because I have things or a certain bias about certain things or certain preconceived notions. So based on that, I may have a tendency to interpret people's behaviors on the basis of my likes and dislikes. And when that happens, you fall into that trap of, being influenced by your preconceived notions. And your preconceived notions are not the facts. So therefore, as managers, we have to develop that knack, that nuance of understanding the subtleties of behavior, understanding behaviors in a very objective manner, and not from the point of view of how I think, not from the point of view of how I like something or I dislike something. So it's not about this, it's about facts. So organized behavior is about an objective reality. It's about what things are. And you have to develop the understanding of things in the right perspective of what things really are in the real sense. This is what organizational behavior is, it's perceived notions. And why we're discussing this is most of the time as managers, we can use these biases, in interpreting people, in understanding people, or this myopic vision that we have, or the preconceived notions that we have. We deploy them in understanding people. And this is where we are, basically becoming, as we say, victims of this entire myopia. So we have to look beyond that. We have to go beyond our preconceived notions, and we have to look at facts when we are trying to interpret people's behavior. In our OB classes, we always discuss that old fable of the six blind men and the elephant. I don't know if you have read that fable. I think most of you must have come across this story of the six blind men and the elephant. For those who don't know, there's this fable of six blind men who wanted to know what an elephant is like, because obviously they had never seen an elephant. So an elephant was actually brought there, and what they could do was they could touch the elephant and make out what it is like. So all these six people, they touched the elephant from different sides because it's a huge animal. They just touched the elephant from different sides. And they interpreted the elephant from the side which they had actually touched. So somebody who had touched the trunk of the elephant, he said that the elephant is like a very big, huge, fat snake. Or somebody who touched the tusks of the elephant, he said that the elephant is like a big, sharp spear. Or somebody who had touched the tail of the elephant said that the elephant is like a rope. So basically what happened was that all these six people, they touched the elephant from different sides. And because they touched the elephant from different sides, they were basically interpreting the elephant from their own, myopic perspectives, from their own narrow perspectives. So somebody felt it was like a spear, somebody felt it was like a rope, and so on. But what is an elephant? An elephant is not a rope. An elephant is not a snake. An elephant is not a spear. An elephant is what it is, what we know it is. So to understand the elephant in entirety, you have to look at the elephant as a whole. You have to look at the entire that animal, and not just the tail or the tusk or the side. So when you look at just one perspective, you arrive at a wrong conjecture of what the actual reality may be. And this is what happens in business organizations also. Which problems from our own narrow lenses, from our own narrow perspectives. So HR people will look at the HR perspective, marketing people will look at the marketing perspective, finance people will look at the finance perspective, and so on. And what happens is that we have a narrow view of what the actual reality may be, of what the organization may be. And in a way, makes us like those men who looked at the elephant only from one narrow perspective and could never understand what the elephant is. The same problem happens with organizations. People look at problems in the organization from their narrow perspectives, as a result of which they are never able to understand what the organization actually is, or what the problem actually is, or what the entire thing looks like. And that is why they arrive at wrong understandings, they arrive at wrong interpretations, they arrive at wrong decisions. And this is the mistake that managers make, organizations make. So we have to look beyond our narrow zones. We have to broaden our horizons. We have to broaden our perspectives. We have to go beyond our preconceived notions, and we have to look at facts. For instance, if I ask you a question, sales is one area of management, right? Now, sales comes under which functional area? Can somebody answer this?
Marketing, ma'am.
Marketing, right? So sales comes under marketing. Typically, sales comes under marketing. When in the final year, you opt for a paper of sales, you would be studying sales under marketing specialization. So sales comes under marketing. Now, let's say in an organization, sales are falling. Sales figures are falling. Sales figures are falling. And the organization observes that over the past 5 months, 6 months, repeatedly, the sales figures are going on falling. Somebody's mic is open. All right. So we observe that over the last 5 years, 5 months, 6 months, sales figures are constantly falling. Now, who will be considered responsible for that? Who will be, in a way, we can say, blamed for that? The marketing department. Typically, the sales and the marketing department, because they are the ones who are responsible for increasing the sales numbers and for sales targets and so on. So typically, if sales are falling, it's always the marketing department which has to do, their homework and understand why sales are falling, what is the reason, and then, they are the ones who will be considered responsible for that. But let us assume that sales are falling because the salespersons have not been given adequate training to carry out, good sales pitches. So then, which department is responsible?
HR.
So it's the HR department, it's the training department or the training cell which is now responsible for falling sales. If, for instance, we realize that sales are falling because the finance department is not releasing good funds for training of the salespersons or for salespersons' commissions and so on. Now, which department is responsible? It is the finance department which is responsible because they are not compensating the salespeople properly. They are not giving funds for their training, because of which there is maybe lack of motivation or whatever, and that is why they are not working enough and the sales figures are falling. It may also happen that you realize that there is a defect in the product and sales are falling because of that defect in the product. Now, which department is responsible? Which function? Marketing? Operations, or maybe quality control, quality assurance. So what happens is that falling sales could be because of problems in the HR department or operations department or finance department or anywhere else in the organization. But normally we behave like those blind men and we may say that, oh, it's the marketing department which is responsible because sales comes under marketing. And we may keep digging for the issues in the marketing department, whereas the real issue, the real problem may lie somewhere in the finance department or somewhere else. So that is why we say that we have to open our vision, make it broader, and look at things from a broader horizon, from a broader perspective, and not from narrow, myopic perspectives. So to understand the real problem, we have to look at broader vision, we have to look at the facts, we have to look beyond our narrow specializations, we have to look beyond our preconceived notions. So that is what the concept of OB basically entails. It says that if there is a behavioral problem, it's not just the HR department which is responsible for whatever happens with people. Maybe something is happening in the marketing department because of which there is a behavioral issue. Maybe something is happening in the operations because of which there is this problem. So we have to look at it from a very comprehensive, holistic perspective, and then understand what really is the problem and how the problem will be addressed. So this is what we mean by replacing intuition with systematic analysis, with systematic study. So the facts are important. Very quickly, I'll discuss this concept of effective versus successful managers. Fred Luthans is a very important name in management theory. Fred Luthans talks about effective managers and successful managers. He says that typically all managers perform 4 activities. First is traditional management activity, which is the planning and controlling and all those things. Second is communication, talking to people, interacting, listening to them, getting to know people, and so on. Third is maybe typical, HR activity like training and staffing and recruitment and selection and motivation, performance appraisal. Again, all managers have to appraise, all managers have to motivate and so on. And then the fourth is networking. Networking is all that, the PR work that you do, making friends and sometimes, developing contacts, public relations within the organization also, making the boss happy and things like that, networking. So those are things that managers do. Traditional management, communication, HR things, and then networking. Now, Luthan says that there's a difference between effective managers and successful managers. But before he discusses that, he discusses about average managers. He says average managers are those managers who are average. So they are the people who spend maximum time on traditional management. So most of the time, average managers will be busy in traditional management activity, decision making, simple, day-to-day routine activity, planning, controlling, all those things. So the administrative activities, the day-to-day routine activities, average managers spend most of the time on that. Then Luthans comes to effective and successful managers. Now, what is this? Effective managers, successful managers, what are they? Are they different? Can somebody answer that? Who are effective managers and who are successful managers?
May I answer this, ma'am?
Yeah, yes.
In my opinion, successful managers are those who actually give a sense of satisfaction to their employees, and at the same time, they get the work done through them.
All right. And who are effective? Who are effective managers then? Okay. Now, see, Luthans talked about effective versus successful managers. So Luthan says that there's a difference between effective managers and successful managers. According to Luthans, effective managers are those who, are actually good for the organization, who are valued by the organization. They know how to get the work done, they perform, and they make others also perform. So they're effective. Successful managers are those who are, very successful in terms of climbing the corporate ladders, career and all those things. They grow very fast. They are those smart people, they grow very fast. They network. They know what are the success, ways of, climbing up the corporate ladder. They get promotions very fast. They rise very fast. So they are successful that way. But most of the time, they are good for themselves and not very good for the organization in the long run. So Luthans actually, distinguishes between effective and successful managers. And he says that successful managers, they spend maximum time on, out of these 4 activities, they spend maximum time on networking. That job of PR and networking and trying to develop contacts, public relations, socializing, sometimes politicking also. As I said, making the boss happy and things like that. So they often spend a lot of time on networking. Whereas effective managers are those who spend maximum time with people, communicating with people, talking to people, understanding people, listening to them, listening to their problems, and then trying to resolve those problems. So effective managers spend maximum time on communication. Communication means talking and understanding and listening and everything. So these are the effective managers. In the long run, organizing effective managers. Successful managers initially, according to Luthans, he uses success in that sense. So initially, successful managers may be very good in terms of rising and all those things. But in the long run, it is the effective managers who are valued by business organizations because they are the ones who are actually spending maximum time with people. So they are, in the true sense, the right OB managers. So they are effective managers. So this is what Luthans talks about managers, being effective, and then how effective managers get the job done. So effective managers, they learn the behavioral side of management, and that is how they get the job done. So they motivate people, they recognize their accomplishments, they appreciate the accomplishments of their subordinates. They also accept a certain degree of opposition. It's okay as a manager to understand that some people may not agree with you. There will be opposition. And it's acceptable. Some amount of opposition is okay. If some people say no, we have to accept that there will be some people who will say no to you. So it's okay. There's a certain degree of civilized opposition is okay. That will be there. And we have to accept that, as a manager, there will be some people who might oppose us. So it's okay. We have to accept a certain degree of opposition. In fact, there's a very interesting thing about opposition. It says that it's healthy. It creates a healthy culture. It gives rise to debate. It gives rise to discussion. It gives rise to brainstorming. It gives rise to new ideas. It keeps the organization alive. So some amount of opposition is okay. And that is what effective managers do. They accept some amount of opposition. Then they help their subordinates assess their strengths and weaknesses. They pass on their learning and their expertise to their subordinates. So you may be very skilled, you may be very qualified, you may be very experienced or whatever, very competent. But if you don't teach your competence to your subordinates, that competence might not be of use. So it has to pass on. You have to pass on your knowledge and learning to your subordinates, juniors, whatever, your team members. Then they balance workplace challenges and conflicts. They enable people, they help people balance these conflicts. They manage co-optation. Co-optation is, competition as well as cooperation. It's a word which has been coined by joining these two words. So co-opetition, healthy competition as well as cooperation. So they manage that. And they point out problems amicably. If there is a problem, if there is a shortcoming, it has to be pointed out amicably. It has to be pointed out in a peaceful way. So this is what effective managers do. Now, coming on to OB as a discipline, I think Zareen ma'am has already discussed how different subjects, different disciplines, they contribute to OB thought. So I'm not discussing this. So sociology, social anthropology, anthropology, political science, psychology, these are all disciplines that actually contribute to OB thought. So different concepts that we discuss in OB, they have all been borrowed from different disciplines like sociology and psychology and so on. And all of these concepts we'll be discussing time and again during this entire course. And so basically, OB is an amalgamation of all these concepts which have been borrowed from different studies, different disciplines. So I'll move on. I'll not discuss this. I'll quickly come to the OB model. The entire concept of OB can be summarized in this OB model. The OB model says that there are 3 levels of analysis in OB: the individual level, the group level, and the organizational level. So as I discussed initially also, we analyze people as individuals, their behaviors as individuals, then we analyze their behaviors in groups, and then we analyze their behaviors as part of the organization in the larger organizational setting. So every employee is an individual, and every employee is also a group member, and every employee is also part of the larger organizational structure. So we have to analyze these 3 levels of behaviors, okay? And during this entire 5 units that we have, we'll be focusing on these 3 different levels. Individual level, so the first 2 units will focus on individual level dimensions. The next unit will focus on group level, and then the last unit will focus on organizational level. So these are the 3 levels of the basic OB model. Now, there are some dependent variables in OB, and there are some independent variables. Independent variables are those variables that exist. They are the givens, and they impact the dependent variable. They impact these outcomes. So we have to actually manage the independent variables so that we have positive outcomes. So the dependent variable is the Y variable, and the independent variable is the X variable. So we actually manage the X variable so that the outcome is managed. So this graph shows that when the X is positively managed and properly taken care of, then Y will also improve. So it's basically this X-Y relationship that we study in organizational behavior. Now, what are these independent variables in OB and what are the dependent variables? So, the independent variables are those three variables that I just now talked about: the individual level variables, the group level variables, and the organization overall systemic variables. These are the three levels of variables which are independent. Independent means they exist, they are there, and they will have an impact on the outcomes. Now, what are these? Some of the independent variables are listed here, which we will be discussing, as I said, in the future units.
The slides are not changing.
So it's not changing. Which slide you
No.
can see?
No, first slide.
First one.
So is it on the first slide only? I'm going on changing. Which slide you can see now?
First slide.
Slide. You didn't tell me.
Slide 0.
Why is it
Now
so?
it's visible.
Which slide is visible now?
14th.
The graph.
Slide 14.
Graph.
This
The graph.
dependent and independent.
Yes, ma'am.
Oh,
Yes,
so
ma'am.
I have used a number of slides before this. And so all this you didn't see? Should have pointed it out earlier.
And we're not sure that it is our fault or our side of this.
Allocation of activities by time I discussed. Now you can see the slide. You can see this allocation of activities by time slide.
No,
Ma'am,
ma'am.
No.
we see the dependent
Hmm.
and independent variable.
No, ma'am.
Ma'am, now we see the allocation of activities by time slide.
So when I'm putting it on the slideshow mode, there is some problem. All right, so I've discussed all this. I've discussed about the disciplines. Then I was discussing this, okay? Three levels
Maybe
of...
have these slides, ma'am.
Sorry?
Maybe have these slides, ma'am.
You want the slides?
Yes.
So all of these
Yes,
things,
ma'am.
they are there in the book, and we'll be giving you some reading material. It will be there, okay? So it will be shared with you. Now, so I discussed this just now, the dependent variable and independent variable. Let me try again if it comes up on the slideshow mode. So the dependent variable, as we just now discussed, is the Y variable, and the independent variable are the X variables. As we manage the X variables, the Y variable gets impacted because of that. So what are the independent variables? Now, can you see this slide of independent variables? No?
No, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
All right. So there is, I think, some issue with the slideshow. I'll correct that later. Anyway, so independent variables are the three levels of OB that we just now talked about: the individual level variables, the group level variables, and the organizational level variables. These are the independent variables. When I say independent, they are those factors which are actually already existing in the organization. They are there. Now, what are the individual level variables? And we'll be discussing all of these in detail later on. So I'm not discussing the details right now. I'm just pointing them out. Individual level variables could be all those factors that are there with me as an individual. So, for example, my personality, my education, my learning, my values and attitudes, emotions, perception, my level of motivation. These are all individual centric factors. They are my factors. So it's my personality, it's my perception, my level of motivation, biographical characteristics, also educational background. All of these are person specific characteristics which are there, which exist. So if you have 100 employees, you will actually have 100 personalities, 100 ways of looking at things, 100 perceptual outlooks. So these are, the variables that exist with an individual. Then we have the group level variables. It is those variables, those dynamics that exist as part of the group. So, for example, how we communicate, how we talk to each other, the conflicts that may happen, the power in politics that may exist in groups, the structure of the group, the power sharing in groups, how groups make decisions, the leaders in groups, the trust which is there in leaders and followers. All these are the group dynamics, group characteristics. These are all independent variables. They will be there. They will be existing in an organization. And then we have the organizational level variables. For example, the overall organization structure, the overall organizational design, the culture of the organization. All these are the larger organizational variables. Now, all of them, as we said, they are all part of the discipline of OB, and we'll be discussing personality and perception and motivation and group working in different parts of the syllabus. Now, these are all independent variables. They will be there, they will exist. Now, we have to manage these independent variables so that we are able to influence the outcomes, the dependent variables. Now, what are the dependent variables? These are some of the dependent variables that we talk about in OB. For example, productivity, how much we are producing, absenteeism, people being absent from work, turnover, how many people are leaving the organization every year, effectiveness, efficiency, job satisfaction, good behavior, organizational citizenship behavior. All these are dependent variables. So essentially, what we do is we manage the independent variables so that the outcomes can be influenced. The dependent variables can be influenced. So independent variables will impact the dependent variables. For instance, motivation is an independent variable. Motivation can have an impact on productivity. Right? Will it have an impact on productivity?
No.
Yeah. So motivation, we say, is a function of, productivity is a function of motivation. So if motivation is high, we expect people will perform, and so productivity will also be high. Similarly, motivation can adversely impact absenteeism. If motivation is low, absenteeism will be high. People will start being absent if motivation is low. Turnover will also be high. So this will depend on motivation. Why do people absent themselves? Why do people absent themselves from work? Because they are not motivated enough. So if motivation is low, absenteeism will be high. So it means we have to motivate people. We have to introduce some motivational mechanisms. We have to introduce some motivational strategies to motivate people so that absenteeism goes down. So we influence, we manage the independent variables so that we can affect the dependent variables. Likewise, efficiency, likewise, job satisfaction. All of these things will be impacted by the independent variables. So as OB managers, we try to manage the independent variables so that we have high productivity, high effectiveness, high efficiency, job satisfaction, and so on, and low absenteeism and turnover. So this is how the independent variable would impact the dependent variable. And before I conclude this model and this lecture for today, there's one more variable which is of significance for us to understand, which is called as the contingency variable. Contingency variables are those extraneous variables, those situational variables that often have some kind of role to play in this XY relationship, in the relationship between independent and dependent variables. So there could be some extraneous variables, some situational variables, some contingent variables, some unforeseen variables that could impact this X and Y relationship. For instance, I just now talked about motivation having a positive effect on productivity. But my question is, does motivation always does it always have a positive effect on productivity? Does motivation always have a positive effect on productivity? So typically motivation is the X variable, productivity is the Y variable. Motivation will impact productivity, but is it so always? Yash, why no? I mean, normal reasoning says that yes, motivation should impact productivity, but why no? Can somebody answer this?
Maybe the productivity is already at the maximum level. So
Sorry, I didn't get you.
Ma'am, maybe See, the productivity is already at the maximum level, so extra
Productivity is
input in the
already at
terms of
maximum.
motivation.
No, see what happens is that sometimes, under normal circumstances, we believe that motivation will impact productivity. But sometimes it may happen that a person may be motivated and yet productivity is not high. Now, there could be several reasons behind this. Simple motivation is not enough to have productivity. So maybe a person is very motivated, but he doesn't have the skill which is needed to be in that position, or he doesn't have the right qualifications, or he doesn't have the right training. So he may be motivated, but he's not adept enough, he's not equipped enough, he's not maybe capable enough to carry out that task. So I may be very motivated, but maybe I'm not competent, maybe I'm not qualified enough, maybe I'm not skillful enough to carry out the task which has been given to me. So, despite the fact that I'm motivated, still my productivity will be low. So, there could be sometimes certain variables that could start impacting this independent dependent relationship. And this is where managers have to understand why is it that despite so many motivation mechanisms being put in place, people are still not performing. People are still not having high productivity. Maybe there is some other reason. Maybe there is some internal problem. Maybe there is a lot of politics which is taking place. Maybe there are a lot of group misunderstandings which are there. Maybe there is lack of trust. Maybe the leader is not, good enough. Whatever. Maybe training is not good enough. So there could be certain other reasons. And so therefore sometimes motivation may not impact productivity positively. So, as a result of all of these things, this role of contingent variable becomes important. And we also have to understand what are those extra situational contingency variables that come into existence that impact this XY relationship. So basically, all of this OB that we will be discussing from the next topic onwards will be about all of these variables, the independent variables, how we understand the independent variables, how we manage them, how we maneuver them, how we in a way manage all of these independent dimensions so that we have more productivity and performance and efficiency and effectiveness. So I think this summarizes this entire introductory concept of organizational behavior. I'll stop here. If you have any quick questions, we can take it up. Zareen, if you want to add anything, if I've missed on something, otherwise we can wind up.
Gee, ma'am, right.
Attendance, have we recorded the attendance?
Yes, ma'am, we have recorded the attendance here.
All right.
Yes, that has been taken care of. Yes.
So anything that is needed to be discussed, you can ask. Otherwise, we'll continue in the next class, the next issues related to OB. Yes? So we can wind up.